In recent years, we have witnessed a significant shift in the way people deal with death and funeral traditions. Cremation, something that once seemed distant, has been gaining ground against traditional burial. The reason? Simple: practical and environmental concerns. Many see cremation as a more affordable and sustainable alternative, taking up less space and requiring fewer resources. However, doubts inevitably arise, especially in the realm of faith, where each choice may have spiritual implications. Now imagine yourself facing an important decision: to go with a traditional burial, full of symbolism, or opt for cremation, which seems more convenient and modern. This choice goes far beyond what we might initially imagine, doesn't it? Often, family tradition weighs heavily, not to mention the emotional aspect of having a physical place to visit and remember the deceased. But what happens when space is no longer sufficient? Or when environmental impact makes us rethink our choices? This is where the dilemma arises, challenging modernity and the roots of deep-seated beliefs. The question that remains then is whether this more recent practice, cremation, has any impact on faith, particularly the Christian belief in resurrection. For some, the body must return to the earth as tradition dictates. For others, the state of the body is of little importance, as faith is based on the promise of eternal life, not on the physical integrity of the body. And here begins a reflection that is worth exploring more deeply, especially when looking at the scriptures and the examples they offer. After all, what does the Bible say about this? When we look at the scriptures, we realize that, interestingly, the Bible does not directly address the practice of cremation. There is no explicit command guiding Christians for or against this practice. However, throughout the scriptures, fire appears as a powerful symbol, often associated with purification and divine presence. We recall the burning bush that spoke to Moses, or the fire that descended from heaven to consume Elijah's sacrifice. These moments bring to light the idea that fire can represent much more than destruction. Another interesting point is how fire is used in different contexts within the Bible. It not only purifies, but is also seen as a means through which God manifests himself. And here arises an intriguing question. If fire is seen as something that can purify, why couldn't it be present in the body's final process? After all, we are reminded that from dust we came, and to dust we shall return. This cycle of life, symbolized by the return to essence, seems to find in fire a way to accelerate what the earth would naturally do. Even though the Bible does not give specific instructions on cremation, we can learn from the stories and symbols it offers. The purification by fire and the use of such elements in the scriptures lead us to think that, for God, the way the body returns to the earth may not be the most relevant point. The focus for many lies in faith in the promise of resurrection. Now, the question that remains is, how does this impact belief in the resurrection? And what is the true weight that cremation carries in this context? The speaker in the video poses a question that goes straight to the point. What is cremation after all? Although it is an increasingly common practice, many people still do not fully understand the process. Basically, cremation is the act of reducing the human body to ashes through a controlled process of high temperature. And then comes the crucial question, what does the Bible say about this? This question is complex, as we have seen before, the Bible does not directly mention this practice, which leads to a series of theological interpretations. And then comes one of the most troubling questions. Could cremation in some way hinder the fulfillment of the promise of resurrection? For those who follow Christian doctrine, this doubt can be distressing. The belief in resurrection is central to Christianity, and any possibility that a cremated body might affect this process naturally raises concerns. However, many theologians argue that God's power transcends the physical form of bodies after death, and that resurrection does not depend on how mortal remains were treated. Finally, what should we consider before deciding whether or not to be cremated? Beyond spiritual and theological implications, there are also practical and emotional issues involved. The decision must be made taking into account the person's beliefs, family traditions, and even the guidelines of the religious denomination to which they belong. Thus, what initially seems like a simple choice between cremation or burial becomes a much deeper and more meaningful decision, both spiritually and personally. The reflection continues. Considering all of this, could the environmental impact weigh on this choice? When we think about cremation, we often do not realize that this practice can be a more sustainable choice than traditional burial. The environmental impact of burials, especially in densely populated urban areas, has become a growing concern. Burials require large areas of land and the use of chemicals to embalm bodies, as well as coffins and tombstones, which consume many natural resources. In contrast, cremation uses less space and, for many, is a way to contribute to environmental preservation, reducing the ecological footprint left even after death. Another point that stands out is the energy use in cremation. Although the process involves high temperatures, experts point out that, compared to the use of land for burials, cremation causes less long-term impact. The carbon emissions generated during the cremation process are still a concern, but in some regions of the world, more environmentally friendly techniques are already being developed to reduce these effects. A practical example is cremations that use more efficient combustion methods or pollutant filtration systems. This trend reflects a change in the way people think about death and the environment. The increasing concern for sustainability influences many to consider cremation as a conscious and responsible choice. With a society increasingly focused on ecological practices, this aspect gains relevance in personal decisions. The question that arises is, does the ecological impact weigh as much as the spiritual issue in this decision? After all, how can one balance faith with the commitment to preserving the environment? Christian faith revolves around a central promise, the resurrection. For those who believe, it doesn't matter if the body was buried or cremated, as God's power transcends any physical limitation. The idea of resurrection teaches us that the human body is only a temporary part of existence. In the end, what truly matters is the soul, and Christian faith makes it clear that resurrection is a spiritual renewal where the body will be transformed regardless of its previous condition. Thus, for many Christians, cremation does not interfere with the fulfillment of this promise. Thinking in this way can be liberating as it removes the pressure of choosing between cremation and burial. The Bible reminds us that Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though they die, will live." This is an affirmation that eternal life does not depend on the physical preservation of the body, but on belief in the divine promise. With this in mind, many believe that the choice to be cremated or buried is more a matter of personal preference than theological implication. This brings spiritual relief to those considering cremation. However, it is worth considering how this decision resonates with the religious community to which one belongs. While some Christian groups accept cremation as a perfectly valid practice, others view it with reservations. The important thing here is the dialogue between individual faith and church doctrine, ensuring that the choice made is in peace with each one's beliefs. And now, bringing all this to light, the question remains: how to balance the freedom of faith with family and community traditions when making this decision? When the time comes to make a decision about what to do with the body after death, many factors come into play. This choice can be influenced by a combination of personal values, family traditions, and religious teachings. On one hand, the tradition of burying bodies has been a common practice in many cultures, filled with rituals that honor life and death. On the other hand, cremation offers an option that seems more practical, especially in modern times, where issues such as space and environmental impact become increasingly important. But how to make this decision in an informed and conscious way? One of the first steps is to assess the doctrines and teachings of your religious community. Some Christian denominations are more open to the idea of cremation, while others maintain burial as a more traditional practice. Talking to spiritual leaders and family members can help understand different perspectives and ensure that the decision aligns with the beliefs of all involved. Furthermore, it is worth remembering that, in many cases, the individual's own wishes should also be respected, which makes early communication about these matters essential. In addition to spiritual matters, there are practical aspects that cannot be ignored. Costs, logistics, and personal preferences play an important role in this decision. Traditional burial can be more expensive and involve a series of preparations, while cremation is generally simpler and less costly. However, both methods can be personalized according to the beliefs and desires of the family. In the end, the most important thing is that the decision brings peace and respects the person's legacy. And the big question that remains is, How to align all of this so that the final choice makes sense both spiritually and emotionally.